Chapter 1. The Map in the Drain. The day Maya Okafor found the map, it was raining so hard that the gutters on Pelican Street turned into tiny rivers. She had been walking home from school, her backpack pulled over her head like a soggy tent, when she noticed something wedged in the iron drain cover at the corner of Pelican and Tide Road. It was a roll of paper, tightly bound with a strip of dark red ribbon. Somehow, despite the downpour, the roll was perfectly dry, not even damp at the edges. Maya crouched down and worked it free from the grate. She turned it over in her hands. The paper was heavy and creamy yellow, the kind her art teacher called parchment. There was nothing written on the outside, no address, no name. She tucked it inside her jacket and ran the rest of the way home. Number 14 Pelican Street was the kind of house that looked like it was listening. It had a wide, low porch with a swing that always needed oiling, and window boxes that Nana B filled with sea lavender every spring. Maya had lived there her whole life, ever since her parents had gone to work overseas when she was 3, and decided that a child needed roots more than she needed the experience of moving between 5 different countries before she could ride a bicycle. Maya didn't mind. She had Nana B, and the sea at the end of the road, and a school she liked well enough, and Finn 3 doors down. That was plenty. The rain hammered the corrugated iron porch roof as she wrestled off her wet shoes. Inside, the house smelled the way it always did, of rooibos and furniture polish, and faintly of the sea, because in Saltwick-on-Sea, the sea got into everything eventually. Maps were pinned to the hallway wall, as they always had been in this house. Nana B collected them the way other people collected decorative plates or ceramic animals. Old maps, new maps, maps of places that no longer existed, maps of places that might not have existed at all. Maya had grown up looking at them. She knew how to read a key and a scale and a contour line before she could properly ride a bicycle. She had always thought she understood maps. She was about to learn that she had understood them only partially. Her grandmother, Nana B, was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of rooibos tea when Maya burst through the back door, dripping puddles on the linoleum. "Heavens, child," Nana B said, without looking up from her crossword. "You look like a sea otter that lost an argument with the ocean." "Nana," Maya held up the roll of parchment, "I found something in the drain." Nana B put down her pen. That alone told Maya this was serious. Her grandmother never put down a pen mid-crossword. She took the roll carefully, the way you might hold a sleeping bird, and slid off the red ribbon. The paper opened with a soft whisper, and both of them leaned over the table. It was a map, but not of any place Maya recognized. It showed a coastline with a long harbor, a lighthouse on a rocky point, and a town spreading inland like the roots of a tree. Streets were drawn in faded ink, labeled in tiny handwriting. At the center of the town, where Maya expected to see a square or a park, there was instead a strange symbol, a circle with 8 lines radiating from it, like a sun but more precise, like a compass rose drawn by a very careful hand. And inside the compass rose, in letters so small Maya had to squint, "The Workshop of E.T. Crane." "Nana," Maya said slowly, "is this our town?" Nana B sat back in her chair. She looked not at the map, but at Maya. Her eyes held something Maya had never seen in them before, a mixture of caution and excitement, like a door being opened just a crack. "Put the kettle on," Nana B said quietly. "I have a story to tell you."
Chapter 2. The Legend of Emmeline Theodora Crane. Emmeline Theodora Crane had been born in the town of Saltwick-on-Sea 112 years ago, in a house on the very street where Maya now lived. She was, by all accounts, the most brilliant inventor the town had ever produced, which was saying something, because Saltwick had produced quite a few. Emmeline had invented the self-adjusting sail, a device that let fishing boats catch the best wind without a sailor having to scramble up the rigging in a storm. She had invented the tide clock, a clock that kept time by the sea's own rhythm instead of a swinging pendulum. She had invented a machine for reading weather patterns that the Meteorology Institute in the city had offered to buy for a very large sum of money, which Emmeline had politely declined. "She didn't care about money," Nana B explained, wrapping both hands around her mug. "She cared about problems. If there was a problem, she wanted to solve it. Full stop." There was a portrait of Emmeline in the town museum, though not many people stopped to look at it. Maya had seen it once on a school trip, a small oil painting in a gilt frame, showing a woman in her 30s with dark eyes and an expression that stopped just short of a smile, as if she were thinking about something amusing but had not yet decided to share it. She wore her hair in a practical knot, and her jacket had a compass pinned to the lapel where other women of her time might have worn a brooch. She looked like someone who was very busy and very certain and very aware that most people around her were underestimating her. Maya had thought, at 9 years old, that she looked interesting. She had forgotten about the painting entirely until this moment. Saltwick had a complicated relationship with its most famous daughter. There was the portrait in the museum. There was a plaque on the house where she was born, on the corner of Pelican and Gull Street, though the plaque was small and easy to miss, wedged between a downpipe and a window frame where a dog could have stood and blocked it completely. The harbor master's office had one of her tide clocks, still running after 100 years, though the current harbor master called it the funny old clock and had no idea who had made it. The town remembered Emmeline the way you remember a dream, in fragments, without context, without quite understanding why the memory feels important. "So what happened to her?" Maya asked. Nana B was quiet for a moment, listening to the rain on the windows. When Emmeline was 43, she announced she was working on her greatest invention yet. She said it would change everything about how people learned. She said it was almost ready, and then, Nana B paused. She disappeared. Disappeared? Vanished. One morning she was here, the next she was gone. No note, no farewell. Her house was found locked, her tools all put away neatly. The invention she had promised, whatever it was never found. Some people said she had moved to the city. Others said she had sailed away. A few said something darker, but those people were unkind and probably wrong. Nana B shook her head. What is certain is that she and her workshop simply ceased to be. Maya looked at the map. But the workshop is still here. Look, it says the workshop of E.T. Crane. That is what the map says, Nana B agreed carefully. You knew about this, didn't you? Maya said. The old woman smiled, a small, secretive smile that Maya had maybe seen twice in her life. Your great-great-aunt Abina used to speak of it. She believed the workshop still existed, hidden underground. She spent years looking for it. She paused. She never found it. But I found the map. You found a map. Whether it is the map is another question. Maya rolled the parchment up carefully and retied the red ribbon. She could feel something buzzing in her chest, like electricity before a storm. "I'm going to find it," she said. "I know," said Nana B, and she didn't sound worried at all. "Take Finn with you. 2 heads are always better than 1, especially when 1 head is as stubborn as yours."
Chapter 3. Finn and the Problem of North. Finnegan Osei Bonsu lived 3 houses down from Maya and was her best friend in the world, which was fortunate because he was also the most irritating person she had ever met. He was irritating because he was almost always right. Not in a show-off way. Finn was the opposite of a show-off. He was quiet and careful and took a very long time to say things, like he was turning each word over and checking it for cracks before he let it out. But when he finally said something, it was almost always correct, and Maya had learned to listen even when she very much did not want to. She knocked on his door at 7 in the morning the next day, a Saturday. "You have that look," he said when he opened the door. He was still in his pajamas, eating a piece of toast. "What look?" "The look where you've already decided to do something, and you're coming to tell me about it, so I think it was partly my idea, too." "That is not—" Maya stopped. "Fine. Can I come in?" She spread the map on his kitchen table and explained everything. The drain, the rain, Nana B's story, Emmeline Crane, the disappeared workshop. Finn ate his toast. He looked at the map for a long time. Maya and Finn had been best friends since the 2nd year of primary school, when they had been paired together for a science project on floating and sinking, and had spent 3 days arguing about whether a submarine counted as floating or sinking, before agreeing that it was doing both at once, which is why it worked. Their teacher had given them full marks and a note saying, "Excellent critical thinking," which Maya had framed and which Finn had memorized and occasionally quoted at people who were being unscientific. They were different in most of the ways that mattered, and similar in the ones that mattered more. Maya was fast and certain, and often right for the wrong reasons, which meant she reached correct conclusions through processes she couldn't always explain. Finn was slow and careful, and often right for exactly the right reasons, which meant his conclusions came with full workings attached. Together, they covered most of the important ground. Nana B called them the hare and the tortoise, though she was careful to point out that in the original story, the tortoise won, which she considered a useful thing for both of them to remember. Maya had thought about asking Mr. Ibarra, her science teacher, for help with the map. She had thought about asking the town librarian, Miss Nakamura, who knew everything about Saltwick's history. But in the end, she had come to Finn first, because Finn was the person she came to first for everything. Some friendships are like that. They become the default setting. When you don't know what to do, you do what you always do, which is find your person and say, "Look at this." "The compass rose," he said at last, pointing. "It's not just decoration. Look at the angle." Maya peered closer. Finn was right. The compass rose at the center of the map was tilted, not pointing straight up the way north usually did on maps. The N at the top of the rose was angled about 15 degrees to the left. "So it's magnetic north, not true north," Finn said. "Whoever made this map was being very precise. They wanted you to use a real compass to follow it, not just guess." "How do you know about magnetic north?" Finn said, "My dad's a navigator," as if this were obvious. "Right." Maya straightened up. "So we need a compass." "I have one." He disappeared upstairs and came back with a brass compass about the size of a 50p coin. He handed it to Maya.
then looked at the map again. One more thing. What? These streets. He traced his finger along the map's inked lines. Some of them are the same as now. Pelican Street, Harbor Road, the Lighthouse Road. But some of them don't exist anymore. Look, this one goes right through where the new library is. And this one, he tapped a long curving line, this one goes underground. See these dashes? On maps, dashes usually mean something underground or underwater. Maya's heart jumped. So Emmeline's workshop isn't just hidden, she said slowly. It's under the town. That would be my guess, Finn said. He took another bite of toast. I'll get dressed.
Chapter 4. The Old Town Below. Saltwick-on-Sea was a town that had been built on top of itself. Nana B. had told Maya this before, in the way grown-ups tell children facts they think are boring but turn out to be extraordinary. Hundreds of years ago, the original settlement had stood lower, closer to the sea. When the great storm of 1743 had flooded the lower streets, the townspeople had simply built higher, piling new houses on top of old foundations, new streets over old lanes, until what had once been street level became basement level, and what had once been basement became the deep dark. Nobody went into the deep dark. It was sealed off, said the town council. Dangerous, said the builders. Full of old pipes and bad air, said sensible adults. Maya and Finn went in through the library. Not on purpose, exactly. The map showed the dashed underground line beginning somewhere near the old town square, and when they walked the route with the compass, adjusting for magnetic north, exactly as Finn had suggested, the line led them to the back of the new library. More specifically, to the old boiler room in the basement, which Maya knew about because she had once chased a very determined spider down there and had noticed the old bricked-up doorway in the back wall. The bricks, it turned out, were not nearly as solid as they looked. Finn pressed on the wall. 3 bricks swiveled on a concealed pivot, revealing a gap just large enough for 2 children to squeeze through sideways. Someone made this on purpose, Finn said. Obviously, Maya said, already squeezing through. Beyond the gap was a stone passage, low-ceilinged and smelling of salt and very old earth. Maya clicked on her torch. The beam fell on walls of dark brick, a floor of worn stone flags, and ahead of them a staircase going down. They descended slowly. The air grew cooler with each step, not damp the way Maya had expected, but clean and dry, like the inside of a sealed tin. Their torchlight caught details as they went, marks scratched into the wall at intervals, regular as breadcrumbs. A triangle, a wave, a star, a triangle again. Navigation marks, Finn said softly, so you knew where you were underground. At the bottom of the stairs, the passage opened into a wider tunnel, and the tunnel into a junction. 3 passages led off in different directions. Maya held up the map. Left, she said. The compass confirmed it. They followed the left passage for what felt like a very long time, but was probably no more than 10 minutes. The walls changed as they walked, from plain brick to brick decorated with fish and waves, to stone carved with more complex patterns, gears and wheels, compasses and scales, the language of someone who thought in machines. She made this, Maya said, running her fingers over a carved gear. Emmeline made all of this. Maya moved her torch beam slowly along the wall, following the carved patterns. The gears were detailed, not just circles with teeth, but real engineering drawings, the kind you found in textbooks, with ratios and angles indicated. Someone had spent a very long time carving them, not as decoration, but as record-keeping,
as if Emmeline wanted to write down her ideas even in stone because paper could burn. She was thorough, Finn said, reading a set of numbers beside a carved gear. These are gear ratios. This one is for a clock mechanism, and this, he pointed to a carved wave pattern with mathematical annotations beneath it. This is the wave frequency formula. She was using the tunnel walls as a notebook. Maya thought about that. A woman working alone underground, with no one to share her ideas with, writing her thoughts on stone because it was the most permanent thing available. There was something both determined and lonely about the image. Did she have friends, Emmeline? Nana B. never mentioned anyone. Her journals would know, Finn said, which was the kind of thing Finn said. He meant it practically. If the workshop existed, the journals would be in it. But it landed differently than he intended. Maya filed it away to ask later. She must have spent years building it, Finn agreed. The passage ended at a door. It was a heavy door, made of dark wood banded with iron, and it had 2 locks, a keyhole, and above it a dial with numbers around its edge, like a safe. A combination lock, Finn said. We need a number. Maya looked at the map. She had been looking at it all morning, and she had noticed something she hadn't been able to explain. Around the border of the map, where other maps had decorative illustrations, Emmeline had drawn small objects: a lighthouse, a boat, a clock face, a compass, a gear, a ruler, a lantern, and a wave. 8 objects in total. 8, like the 8 lines of the compass rose. She counted the objects in order, clockwise from the lighthouse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What if the combination is 8, she said, just 8? Finn tried it, turned the dial to 8. Click. The door swung open.
Chapter 5. The Workshop of E.T. Crane. The room beyond the door was not what Maya had expected. She had expected something dark, dusty, cobwebbed, the inside of a fairy tale full of forgotten shadows. Instead, she stepped into a space that was simply astonishing. The workshop was large, much larger than she'd imagined possible underground. The ceiling was high, supported by elegant arched columns of dark brick. Along the walls ran shelves from floor to ceiling, and on those shelves sat tools, instruments, models, and machines in a state of perfect order, as if their owner had just stepped out and would be back any moment. Jars of screws and bolts were labeled in a precise hand. Coils of copper wire hung on wooden pegs. Books were stacked in neat towers. On a central work table, a half-finished machine sat exactly as its maker had left it, tools arranged around it like a patient constellation. But the most remarkable thing, the thing that made Maya's breath catch and Finn say, "Oh," in a very small voice, was the light. The room was lit, not by torches or candles, but by a soft golden light that came from glass tubes fitted along the ceiling, glowing steadily with a warm luminescence that had no apparent source, no flicker, no smoke, perfectly even, perfectly calm. Electric light, Finn breathed, 100 years before they put proper electricity in Saltwick. Maya walked slowly into the room, turning in a full circle. On one wall, a chalkboard still held calculations, rows of neat numbers and symbols that made her head spin. On another wall, dozens of clocks hung, not ordinary clocks, but extraordinary ones. Some had extra hands, some had extra dials, some appeared to be measuring things other than time entirely. One corner of the workshop was different from the rest. While the main space was orderly and purposeful, this corner was more personal. A small armchair,
worn down on the right arm where someone had rested their elbow for years, a side table with a ring mark from a mug, still visible after a century, a shelf at eye height holding not tools but objects, a small carved wooden bird, a dried flower pressed under glass, a child's tin painted with the sea, and books, not technical books, but novels, poetry collections, a history of navigation, a thick volume of mythology from a dozen different cultures. "She lived here," Maya said quietly. "Not just worked here, she lived here." "Or spent so much time here it was nearly the same thing," Finn said. Maya thought about this for a moment. Then he went to the third shelf, left side, second from top, and lifted down a slender blue book. Chapter 6. The Learning Engine. The blue book was titled, in gold letters on the cover, The Learning Engine, Design, Function, and Purpose, being a complete account of the machine by Emmeline T. Crane. They sat together at the work table and read. The learning engine, Emmeline explained in her clear, unhurried way, was a machine for making knowledge available to everyone, not just to people who could afford schools, or who lived near libraries, or who had parents who read. Anyone who held the engine and turned the correct sequence of keys could call up information on any subject: history, science, mathematics, language, music, medicine, engineering, presented in a way that matched exactly how that particular person learned best. "It adapts," Finn said, reading ahead. "Look, she writes that the central glass piece is a lens that reads the user's responses and adjusts the presentation accordingly. If you learn better with pictures, it shows pictures. If you learn better with words, it shows words. If you learn better by doing, it gives you a puzzle to solve." "She invented the internet," Maya said. "More like a personalized tutor," Finn said. "But yes, 112 years ago, underground, by herself." They read on. The engine worked using a principle Emmeline called resonant information storage. She had found a way to encode knowledge not in ink on paper, but in patterns of vibration held in a crystalline material, which is what the empty glass circle in the center was meant to hold. The crystal wasn't lost. Emmeline's note at the bottom of Chapter 3 said it was kept separately for safety, in the glass cabinet against the far wall, the one with the brass handle in the shape of a fish. Maya found the cabinet. Inside, wrapped in blue velvet, was a crystal disc about the size of a biscuit, perfectly clear, cut with such precision that it threw tiny rainbows across the wall when her torch hit it. She carried it to Finn, who read the instructions with immense care, and then very gently seated the crystal in the glass circle on the engine. Something happened. A sound, low, clear, like a single note played on a glass harp, rose from the machine and faded. The crystal glowed faintly. The tiny keys along the surface shifted just slightly, rearranging themselves with a whisper of gears. Then silence. The engine did something unexpected after Maya asked it for everything. It paused, a long considering pause, the crystal turning through colors Maya didn't have names for. And then it did not show her everything. Instead, it asked her a question. What do you already know that you are certain is true? Maya thought about this for a moment. Then she typed, "The Earth goes around the sun. Gravity pulls things down. Plants need light. People need other people." The engine was quiet for another moment. Then, "Good. We begin from what is certain and build outward. This is the only reliable way. What are you least certain about?" Maya typed without really thinking, "Whether what I do makes any difference." Another pause. The crystal colors shifted again. Then, that is not a question for an engine, but it is the most important question. I will show you things that will help you decide for yourself. Shall we begin with how the universe began, or with how this town began? Both stories have more in common than you might expect. Maya chose the town. She was not sure, looking back, whether it was the right choice or not. But the engine was right about one thing. The stories were connected in ways she never would have guessed. "Is it working?" Maya asked. "I think it just started up," Finn said. He looked at the book again. "The first key sequence, the one to tell it who you are these 5 keys in this order," he pointed. Maya pressed the 5 keys. They depressed with a satisfying click, 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 click. The crystal pulsed once. Then, through some mechanism Maya couldn't see, symbols began to appear on the crystal's surface, tiny, glowing, clear as print. They read, "Welcome. What would you like to learn?" Maya looked at Finn. Finn looked at Maya. "Everything," she typed. And the learning engine began.
They spent 4 hours in the workshop that first day. They had meant to spend 1, but the learning engine was so astonishing that every answer it gave led to 3 new questions, and every question led deeper into a subject they hadn't known they were interested in. Maya discovered she was fascinated by astronomy. She had always liked looking at the night sky, but she had thought it was just a pretty thing, like a painting. The engine showed her the physics of stars, how they were born in clouds of gas and dust, how they burned for billions of years through nuclear fusion, how the light she saw at night had left those stars before humans had even learned to write. It showed her the distances in ways she could actually grasp. If the sun were the size of a football, the nearest star would be another football 40,000 kilometers away. It gave her puzzles to solve, stellar distances, orbital periods, the mathematics of gravity, and when she got them right, it showed her something new, something even more amazing. Finn asked it about engineering. The engine showed him bridges, and then the mathematics of tension and compression, and then the history of materials, from stone to steel to carbon fiber, and then a puzzle where he had to design a bridge across a gorge using only certain materials, and his bridge held more weight than the engine's suggested solution. "Well done," the engine said. "Design principle applied correctly. Bonus, the person who built the first suspension bridge in England." Finn sat up straight. "I didn't ask about that." "Correct, but based on your previous responses, I believe you will find it interesting." He did. They lost track of time completely. It was only when Maya's stomach growled loudly enough to echo off the stone walls that they remembered they had left home 6 hours ago without telling anyone where they were going. "My mom!" Finn said in horror. They ran. On the way back through the passage, Finn leading, having memorized the route, Maya thought hard about what to do. They couldn't tell adults. Adults would inform the town council, and the town council would seal the workshop off again for safety reasons, and that would be the end. But they couldn't just keep it secret forever either. The whole point of the engine was that it was for everyone. "We need to make a plan," she said, squeezing back through the library boiler room. The passage back felt different from the passage there. On the way in, every new thing was a discovery, a found note, a carved wall, a door that opened with a single clean click. On the way back, they had something to carry, not physically, but in the way that an extraordinary experience sits in you differently from an ordinary one. Maya moved through the tunnel thinking about Emmeline's note, about the phrase, curious enough to look, patient enough to follow, brave enough to go underground. It sounded simple when you read it. It was simple, and yet most people, she knew, would have left the roll of parchment in the drain and walked home.
Most people would have looked at the map and said, "This is old, this is not mine, this is none of my business." She did not think this made her special. She thought it made her lucky. There was a difference, and Emmeline's engine had already shown it to her. In the history of discoveries, the discoverers were not always the most brilliant people in the room. They were often just the ones who happened to be looking in the right direction at the right moment and who did not look away. What you did after the looking, that was where character came in. "We need to explain to my mom where we've been first," Finn said grimly. That turned out to be manageable. Maya told Finn's mother they'd been at the library and lost track of time, which was technically true, and Finn's mother, who was a daisy and was a quietly fierce woman who worked as an architect, looked at them with the expression of a person who does not entirely believe you but is choosing to let it go for now. "Dinner in 10 minutes, both of you. Maya, call Nana B." Maya called Nana B, who also said dinner in 10 minutes, and also said very little else, which Maya found slightly unsettling. That night, lying in bed with the brass compass on her nightstand and the map rolled up under her pillow, Maya thought about Emmeline Crane, a woman who built a room full of wonders and then disappeared, leaving them for a future that was ready for them. Had she known she would disappear? Had she known someone would find it exactly 112 years later, 2 children on a rainy Saturday? She probably hadn't known exactly, but she had hoped and she had planned. Maya decided that was enough.
Chapter 8. The Problem of Telling. Over the next 3 weeks, Maya and Finn visited the workshop 11 times. They told no one. They kept to their regular Saturday and Sunday routines, walking the long way round through the park so their phones showed movement in a normal direction, arriving at the library as casual visitors, descending to the boiler room when the coast was clear. They learned extraordinary things. Maya's knowledge of astronomy grew until she was asking questions at school that confused her teacher, Mr. Ibarra, who was an excellent science teacher, but had not expected a 10-year-old to ask him about the difference between neutron stars and quark stars. She started writing her questions down instead of asking them aloud, so she could take them to the engine. Finn redesigned the school's broken water fountain using the structural principles the engine had taught him about fluid dynamics. He drew up a diagram and showed it to the school caretaker, Mr. Obi, who looked at it for a long time and then said, in a voice of great surprise, "This would actually work, you know." "I know," said Finn. But the secrecy was becoming a weight. Maya felt it especially on the day she found Emmeline's journals. They were on the 4th shelf. She'd been working her way through the books systematically, and there were 6 of them, leather-bound, dated across 20 years of work. Maya read them slowly over several visits, and what she found was not just the record of inventions, but the record of a person. Someone who had been told constantly that her work was too ambitious, too strange, too far ahead of its time. Someone who had argued and pushed and kept going anyway, driven by a conviction that useful knowledge should not be the property of the lucky or the wealthy. The last journal, dated the year Emmeline disappeared, ended mid-sentence. "I believe the engine is now ready for its first test, and I have found the ideal subject. A girl from the harbor school who has a gift for mathematics but no money for further education. Tomorrow I will—" and then nothing. Maya sat with the open journal in her hands for a long time. Emmeline had been trying to help someone. She had been on the verge of it, and something had stopped her. She had no idea what. But she knew, reading those journals, that Emmeline had not wanted the engine to stay hidden. She had wanted it used. "We have to tell someone," Maya said that afternoon, when Finn was examining a miniature tide-measuring device. He didn't look up. "I know." "Not the town council." Obviously not the town council. "Someone who will understand. Someone who will help us figure out how to share this without it getting sealed up or taken away or put in a museum where people just look at it instead of using it." Finn put down the tide measurer. He thought for a moment. He had that expression he got when he was turning an idea over very carefully. "My mom," he said at last. Maya blinked. She had not expected that. "She's an architect. She thinks about buildings, how to use them, how to make them work for people, how to make them safe. And she's—" Finn paused. "She's not the kind of person who closes things off just because they're old or complicated." Maya thought about Arieze Osei Bonsu, with her precise hands and her quiet authority, and the way she'd looked at Finn's water fountain diagram. "Okay," said Maya. "We tell your mum."
Chapter 9. Arieze. They told her on a Sunday evening, sitting at the kitchen table with the map spread between them, the brass compass beside it. Arieze listened without interrupting. This was her most impressive quality. She listened the way a lake listens, taking everything in without rippling. When Maya and Finn finished, she looked at the map for a long time. Then she asked 3 questions. "Is the passage structurally safe?" "As far as we can tell," Finn said. "The brickwork looks solid. Emmeline knew what she was doing." "Is the workshop dry?" "Completely. Her ventilation system still works. We don't know how, but there's fresh air down there." "Is the machine functional?" "Yes," they said together. Arieze was quiet. She picked up the compass, looked at it, set it down. "You should have told me sooner," she said. "We know," Maya said. "You were worried we'd seal it off." "Yes. I understand why you thought that. But here is the thing. What you found is not just a workshop. It's a piece of the town's history that the town doesn't know it has. And the machine, if it works the way you're describing, is something far beyond ordinary. Decisions like this shouldn't be made by 2 children alone, or by 1 architect, or even by the town council." She paused. "They should be made by the right people." There was a silence in the kitchen after Arieze said this, the kind of silence that meant something important had just happened, or was about to. Maya looked at Finn. He was watching his mother with an expression she recognized, careful attention, taking notes in the part of his brain that she sometimes thought was running continuously on a very slow loop, recording everything for later. Arieze stood up and went to the window. Outside, the street was quiet in the way it got on Sunday evenings. Shops closed, the last of the weekend walkers gone home, the town settling into itself. She stood there for a moment, looking at nothing in particular. "My grandmother," she said, without turning around, "was the first woman in her village to go to university. She had to fight every single person who had any authority over her life to do it. She went anyway. When she graduated, there was no one from her family there to watch because they had not been invited, or rather she had been told quietly and firmly that it would be better if she came alone. She went alone. She graduated first in her class. She came home and taught mathematics for 40 years and changed the lives of more children than any of us will ever be able to count, because the students she taught their own students, and so on and so on." She sat back down. "Emmeline Crane sounds like someone my grandmother would have recognized, a person ahead of her time who was not allowed to be."
Maya found she didn't have anything to say to this. Finn didn't either. That, Ariaze said, is why we are going to do this correctly, not because of rules, because the story deserves to be told properly. Who are the right people? Maya asked. Ariaze almost smiled. That's the right question, and finding them will take some work. Over the next week, Ariaze moved quietly. She was the kind of person who got things done without making noise, and Maya began to understand where Finn got his patience from. She spoke to the head of the local historical society, a small, energetic woman named Dr. Voss, who spent 30 years documenting Saltwick's past and immediately became almost unreasonably excited about Emmeline Crane. She spoke to a solicitor about heritage law. She did not speak to the town council, not yet. We need to be ready before they know, she explained to Maya and Finn. If we present them with a problem, they'll want to fix it by closing it. If we present them with a solution, they'll want to take credit for it. That's a bit cynical, Finn said. That's experience, said his mother.
Chapter 10. What the Town Remembered. Dr. Voss arrived at the workshop on a Wednesday afternoon, guided by Maya and Finn, and she did not speak for the first 3 minutes. She stood in the doorway with her hand pressed over her mouth, looking. Then she walked slowly to the central work table and looked at the engine. Then she turned and looked at the shelves. Then she looked at the chalkboard, still covered in Emmeline's calculations. Then she sat down on a stool and breathed very carefully for a moment. "I have been looking for evidence of this room for 30 years, she said finally. I found exactly 2 references to it in letters from 1931, and both referred to it as a rumor. It wasn't a rumor, Maya said. Clearly not. Dr. Voss looked at the engine. May I? Maya nodded. Dr. Voss approached the engine carefully and read the welcome sequence from Finn's careful notes. She pressed the 5 keys. Welcome. What would you like to learn? Dr. Voss said, with a slight catch in her voice, History. I would like to learn history. The engine showed her the history of Saltwick-on-Sea, not from a textbook, but from primary sources, letters, harbor records, newspaper cuttings, maps, accounts of storms and harvests and fishing seasons and council meetings. It showed her photographs she had never seen. It showed her the records of the old school on the harbor where Emmeline had studied as a girl. It showed her things that the town's official archive had lost or forgotten. Dr. Voss pressed the back of her hand to her eyes. Maya pretended not to notice. She didn't just build a teaching machine, she said. She built a library, an archive. She was storing the town's memory in a form that couldn't burn or flood or be lost. She was preserving it, Maya said softly, for later, for people who would need it. Like us, Finn added. Dr. Voss looked at both of them with an expression that Maya would remember for the rest of her life. Not quite admiration, something more personal than that, as if she were recognizing them as particular kinds of people. Like you, she said. That night, Maya sat with Nana B on the back porch, watching the last of the evening light disappear over the water. Nana B had known, Maya now realized, had known at least part of the story all along. She had known about Abina's search for the workshop, and she had recognized the map, and she sent Maya to find Finn instead of to an adult, precisely because she had understood something Maya hadn't, that this was a discovery that needed young eyes, because what it contained was for the future. Nana B was quiet for a long time after Maya told her about the journals, about the unfinished sentence, about the girl from the harbor school with a gift for mathematics and no money for further education.
The porch swing moved gently. Somewhere in the harbor, a boat was coming in late, its light a steady, warm point in the darkening water. My mother used to say that the worst kind of loss is the loss of a future that was almost yours, not a future that was impossible, those you can make peace with, but a future that was right there, within reach, that was taken or interrupted at the last moment. That's the one that stays with you. Is that what happened to Emmeline? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. But I know what happened to the girl from the harbor school because Abina told me. Her name was Clara Vane. She was 12 years old in the year Emmeline disappeared. She was, by all accounts, extraordinarily good at mathematics, the kind of good that her teachers recognized and didn't quite know what to do with because there was nowhere for a girl like that to go in 1913. No university would take her. No employer would pay for that kind of mind. She paused. She grew up to be a school teacher, a good one by all accounts, but she never got the chance Emmeline was planning to give her. Maya thought about patience at the learning engine, typing with quick, certain fingers. She thought about Imogen, who struggled with reading. She thought about every child who had ever had a gift that the world didn't quite have room for yet. "We'll make it right," she said. It felt like a strange thing to say. You couldn't make right something that happened a century ago, but the engine was there, and it was working, and it was going to be open to everyone. That was something. It was not nothing. "I know," Nana B said simply. "That's why I gave you the map." "Why didn't you just tell me everything from the start?" Maya asked. Nana B rocked in her chair. "Because half the value of finding a thing is the finding. If I'd handed you a complete story, you'd have had information. This way, you have knowledge." She paused. "There's a difference." "Emmeline's machine could tell the difference too," Maya said. "I know," said Nana B, smiling. "That's how I know she was a good teacher."
Chapter 11. The Presentation.
The town council meeting was held on the first Friday of November in the old council chambers on Market Square. Adaze had arranged it. Dr. Voss had prepared the materials. Maya and Finn had written a 10-page report, Finn on the structural findings and historical context, Maya on the engine's function and Emmeline's journals, and had printed it on good paper with a cover that Finn had designed carefully, with Emmeline's compass rose symbol centered on the front. The 7 council members sat along a curved table and looked at Maya and Finn with expressions ranging from politely interested to openly skeptical. The most skeptical was Councillor Price, who was a large man with a large voice and the air of someone who had heard many unusual proposals and dismissed most of them. "You're telling us," he said, after the first 5 minutes, "that 2 children found an underground workshop beneath the library that has been there for 112 years, containing a working machine that teaches people things." "That is correct," Maya said. "And no one found this before?" "No one was looking in the right place," Finn said, "and no one had the map." "The map you found in a drain?" "Yes." Councillor Price made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Adaze spoke before he could continue. "Councillor Price, Dr. Voss has documented the workshop under the Saltwick Heritage Sites Protocol. The structural report is in your pack, page 14. The machine has been assessed by 2 independent experts in mechanical engineering. The historical provenance is unambiguous." She paused. "These children didn't make any of this up. They found something real. The question before this council is not whether it exists, but what to do about it." There was silence. The silence after Adaze's statement lasted approximately 4 seconds, which felt considerably longer.
Then, Counselor Chen, who was the oldest member of the council and had been in local government for 22 years, leaned forward and said, "I want to understand the machine. Not technically. I don't expect to understand it technically. I want to understand what it does for a child who uses it. You said it adapts. What does that mean in practice?" Maya had hoped someone would ask this. "There's a girl in my class," she said, "called Imogen. She's brilliant at understanding things when someone explains them to her, but she struggles to read long pieces of text. The words move around for her," she says. "She's never been diagnosed with anything, but reading is hard. She gets frustrated and gives up." Maya paused. The engine would show Imogen the same information but differently. More pictures, more audio descriptions, shorter pieces of text. It would find the way that works for her brain and use that, so she wouldn't be stuck. She could learn anything she wanted to learn in the way that worked for her, at her own pace. "Without being made to feel stupid first," Counselor Ade said quietly. "Yes," Maya said, "without that." Counselor Chen sat back. He looked at the document in front of him for a moment. Then he looked at Counselor Ade, and something passed between them that Maya couldn't quite read but felt significant. "I think," said Counselor Chen, "that I would like to see this machine before we vote." Then the youngest counselor, a woman called Counselor Ade, who had been quiet through the whole meeting, said, "What do you think should happen to it?" She was looking at Maya. Maya had thought about this. She had thought about it for weeks, lying in bed, sitting in the workshop, reading Emmeline's journals. She said, "It should be open, not as a museum, not just for looking at, as a place for learning, open to any child in Saltwick and free, and running the way Emmeline intended. The engine should be in use, the archive should be accessible, and the history of how it was found should be part of the story the town tells about itself. Because Emmeline Crane was born here and changed the world here, and the town forgot her, and that's something that needs to be put right." Counselor Price opened his mouth. Counselor Ade said very calmly, "I move that the council votes to support the proposal as presented." 4 other counselors seconded it. Counselor Price looked as though he had swallowed something surprising. The motion passed 5-2. Chapter 12. The Crane Center. They opened the Crane Center in the spring. Adeaze oversaw the restoration. Careful, painstaking, done with complete respect for what Emmeline had built. The passage was reinforced with steel arches at regular intervals, but the original brickwork was preserved. New lighting was added, but it was designed to complement the existing electric light, not replace it. The workshop was cleaned and documented and stabilized, and Emmeline's tools and instruments were catalogued by Dr. Voss's team in a process that took 4 months and produced a 400-page archive. The learning engine presented a particular challenge. 2 engineers from the city's university spent 6 weeks studying it before concluding, with expressions of slight bewilderment, that it was both structurally sound and, as far as they could tell, technically beyond anything that should have been possible in 1913. They could not explain the crystal's resonance principle. They could not identify the power source for the ceiling lights. They could not determine how the ventilation convection worked with such precision. "She was just very good," Finn said when Maya told him about the engineer's conclusions. "Yes," Maya agreed. The opening ceremony was attended by the whole school, which meant 240 children filing down into the workshop in groups of 30, faces going from nervous in a tunnel to stunned in the doorway to completely captivated by the engine, in a sequence that Maya watched from the corner with a feeling she didn't have quite the right word for. The descent into the Crane Center was, Maya would always think, the most interesting part of any visitor's experience. Not because it was the most impressive, but because of what it did to people's faces. Everyone expected underground to feel enclosed, to feel dark and heavy and pressing. Instead, Emmeline's ventilation system filled the passage with air that moved gently and smelled of clean stone, and the arched ceiling was high enough that even tall adults didn't have to duck. The navigation marks on the walls, the triangle, the wave, the star, had been labeled now, explained on small plaques, though Maya had argued successfully that the marks themselves should remain untouched. Coming down the passage was like walking into a book that was still being written. It had the feeling of continuation rather than preservation. The children were always the most interesting to watch. The younger ones gasped openly when they saw the workshop, hands flying to their mouths, eyes going wide, the full theatrical astonishment of people who had not yet learned to pretend not to be astonished. The older ones tried for a moment to be cool about it, to look around with the studied casualness of people who had seen underground workshops before, and then they failed, because you couldn't be cool about this. Emmeline's workshop would not allow it.